Hey everybody, welcome to Chapter 15, Drawing Aesthetics. In this chapter, we will be discussing 4 different sections in video format, and there is a 5th optional section that will be discussed in the class session only. Section number 1 is the definition of filled regions, masking regions, and hatch. Section number 2, detail lines. Section number 3, the line work tool. And section number 4, detail components and adding detail components to views in Revit. Section number 5, which is the in-class session only, will be a discussion and demonstration on virtual reality. So if you want to come to that, let's make arrangements for you to be able to see that. This video is for section number 1, the definition of filled regions, masking regions, and hatch. All right, let's talk about hatch and filled regions in Revit. Hatch is used to represent different patterns and different cut areas of certain views in Revit, okay? So you'll hear the term hatch, but you will also hear the term poche a lot. And when I say the term hatch, hatch is going to be something like this vertical line pattern on this wall that represents materiality, or this solid hatch pattern, this gray hatch pattern that we see in the window that indicates glass in the window, essentially. So hatch or poche can indicate materiality. It can also indicate cut lines if you're looking on a floor plan. If you happen to see a dark gray solid hatch pattern in the walls, that indicates a cut pattern on the wall. All right, so let's talk about the different types of hatch in Revit. So here we have drafting and we have model, okay? So let's talk about a drafting hatch pattern first. Drafting patterns represent materials in symbolic form only. So for example, sand is represented by a stipple pattern. The density of the drafting pattern is fixed and doesn't change even if you change the scale of the drawing view. So these patterns, they're sort of a standalone hatch pattern. And we have a lot of them, and they represent a lot of different things. So for example, if you needed to draw some earth, you would use the earth pattern to represent earth. If you needed to represent some sand, you would use the sand to represent that. If you needed a solid fill, we have a solid fill here. So hatch patterns are going to represent different things, and here's a good sampling of what they all look like. Okay. When we talk about filled regions, I'll show you how to access these fill patterns here. Okay. So we also have model patterns within our Revit model, and model patterns represent actual element appearance on a building, such as brick coursing or ceramic tile on a wall. They're fixed with respect to the model. So this means that when we scale the model patterns scale with the model. So when the view scale changes, the pattern changes accordingly, right? So just like text gets larger and smaller, depending on the scale of the view so that it prints accurately on your page, model patterns will do that as well. Another really great thing about model patterns is that you can somewhat alter them a little bit. So you can move the pattern of the lines by dragging them or using the move tool. So for example, if you had used the 12-inch tile pattern and you wanted it centered on a room, you could grab those lines of the tile and you could move them around the room to center them. They create dimensions that reference pattern lines. So you can dimension your hatch patterns and you can resize them and move the pattern lines. You can rotate the patterns and you can align the patterns to different elements. So if you wanted to take your tile pattern and align it to a joint in the wall, you definitely could do that. And we have that freedom with model patterns only. We don't have that freedom with drafting patterns, okay? We can create new patterns, we can edit existing, we can delete fill patterns, and we can duplicate them. However, they're not as easily manipulated as one would think. So that's going to be a little bit more of an advanced type application that we won't get into in this course. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how we are going to use hatch to create filled regions. And I want to show you a good application of a filled region. All right. So we're going to switch over to maybe a different view here. I'm just going to go to this view here. This is a detail view, all right? And this is indicating in a sectional view. I just changed to shaded view so you could see it a little better. HL, hidden line. This is a detail of a foundation base, and we have a concrete slab coming in here. We've got a foundation wall here. We have some interior lines here that we're not going to worry about just yet. In fact, those look like they might be a stair, I was going to say. And we have a piece of storefront here. So let me show you how I would use filled regions in combination with some hatch to add some detail to this detail that we have here. I'm going to come up to the Annotate tab, and we have our region command here under the Detail Tool palette. So if I click on Region, by default, my filled region is going to initiate, and I'm going to be bumped into sketch mode. Okay, so by clicking on it, I get into a filled region. If I click on the down arrow here, I have the option to choose a filled region or a masking region. All right, but again, we're going to choose filled region for now. So a filled region will allow me to draw a little region of hatch, essentially. So a pattern that represents something in the drawing. The way that we're going to go about this is that we are going to choose the thickness of the boundary around our hatch region. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a little region of concrete, right, where this slab comes in here, because there's no pattern on it right now. And I'm going to indicate that this is a concrete slab, and I'm going to do that with a filled region. So I'm going to choose a line weight that is similar in thickness to this, maybe a medium or a wide thickness. And so I'll choose wide just for now. I'm going to choose the line tool to draw my region. I'm going to click. You see that that line weight is a pretty good match to what I'm tracing over. And there we go. And you'll notice that there is no line here, right? I don't see a cut line, but I do need a line to enclose my hatch region. These have to be entirely closed regions in order to generate. Closed meaning there has to be 4 sides and no gaps in them. So I'm going to go back to my line tool, but instead of finishing this off with a wide line, I'm going to use an invisible line. And that invisible line will allow me to enclose that region, but it won't show when I finish the actual pattern. Okay, so I have my boundary chosen here, and now it's time for me to pick what kind of hatch I want to fill that boundary. So I'm going to come up here to my type selector, and I have one type of hatch generated here, and it's a vertical hatch. Okay, so we have hatches inherently available in Revit, but that doesn't mean that we have them assigned to be available for a filled region here. So I'm going to hit Edit Type, and I'm actually right now going to create a brand new hatch that will be available for this filled region. I'm going to choose Duplicate, and we'll call this Concrete, and I'm going to hit OK. So I've just duplicated my hatch pattern, and I'm going to change the fill pattern right here from triangles, right, to, let's find our concrete. And this is a drafting pattern, which means if I chose a drafting pattern right now, that it wouldn't flex with the model when I scale it. Although you're going to see sometimes not all of the hatch patterns are available in both types, model and drafting. Okay, so I'm going to pick my detail concrete. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to hit OK again. And by doing that, I've just created a brand new concrete hatch for my filled region. I have the outline of my filled region generated. If I wanted to change one of the lines, I could click on it and I could drop down and change it to something else, like a thin line, right? You can see that. We're going to change it back to a wide line. Looks pretty good. I could draw multiple other filled regions in here, so just to, for sake of example, I'm just going to draw a region over there, even though I don't need one, just to show you we can create one region here and a second filled region there. I'm going to hit Finish, and there are my 2 regions of concrete. Okay, so we're adding some detail to this actual construction detail in our project. I'm going to click on that region, and you're going to notice they're connected. So I have one little piece here and one little piece here. You're going to notice some grips pop up, and I can make this smaller or larger, right, depending on what I need. Okay, I could do the same thing over here if I needed to. I could click on this again, and I could hit Edit Boundary, and I could get rid of this over here. I could hit Delete, okay, and I could hit Finish, and now I just have this little piece of slab over here, all right? Now, one thing I want to make evident is that filled regions and masking regions, they're view specific. So they are only going to be able to be viewed in the view that we generate them. And if I were to copy this view, I wouldn't see this same hatch pattern in the new view that I generated. Let's create a couple more hatch patterns in here. I'm going to do some concrete in the foundation, and then we'll do some earth on the outside here. And I think that will really show how the command works. So I'm going to click on Filled Region again, and I'm going to click on my tool I want to use to draw. I'm going to choose my wide lines again, and I'm just going to outline this foundation wall there. I'm going to click on this line, and I'm going to make it invisible, okay, and I'm going to hit Finish. And I have my concrete selected, so of course I get another piece of concrete there, okay. I'm going to create some earth hatch over here. So I'm going to go back into my region, filled region, and instead of concrete, I need an earth hatch pattern. So I'm going to choose Edit Type again. I'm going to duplicate, and I'm going to type earth and hit OK. And we are going to choose, instead of concrete, we're going to find the earth hatch pattern, hit OK, OK. And now I have an earth hatch pattern assigned to this new sketch that I'm generating. So I'm going to click on my spline tool here, and I'm going to create kind of a wavy little line that indicates I have some earth coming down from my detail, and the rest of the lines are going to be invisible. So I'm going to create my invisible line here, my invisible line here, and right there. And I'm going to just nudge my little invisible line over so it doesn't cover my wide line right there. I'm going to hit Finish, and that little piece of earth hatch has been generated. Now, you saw immediately it was cut off, and that's because there is a crop region, right, associated with this little detail. So I'm going to pull my crop region out just a little bit, turn it back off, and there's my detail. Okay. So hatch patterns or filled regions are really great for adding detail to objects here. And they're also really helpful for obscuring items that you kind of want to hide in the view. All right. So I'm going to show you if I choose a filled region with purely an invisible line boundary, I could obscure some of these things on the inside that maybe I didn't want to see in my detail. So I'm going to hit Edit Type here, and I'm going to create just a purely white hatch pattern. Now, some things you're going to notice in this Type Properties dialog box are that we have the drafting pattern here, right? And you're able to, let's create a solid fill here, solid fill, and we'll make this, instead of a black solid fill, we'll make it white. But you're also able to make the background pattern opaque or transparent. So if I'd wanted to make this pattern see-through, I could have. But in this case, I don't want it. I want to be able to obscure things behind it, so I left it opaque. I'm going to hit Finish, and now you can see that that hatch pattern was able to obscure those stairs that were being viewed there in that detail. So that is a filled region. Okay, a filled region can obscure items. It can create detail within details. And another really great use for a hatch pattern, or excuse me, a hatch pattern, is we're going to be using a masking region. So a masking region is a little bit different than a filled region. Okay, they function identically, but a masking region will allow you to obscure things, mask items out, okay? And probably the best use for a masking region is to obscure things outside of a view that you don't want to see. So what that means is that I'm going to click on the masking region, and I get bumped into a sketch mode just like I do with my filled region, right? So what I'm going to do here is I've got my invisible line tool selected. I'm going to create maybe a region that is this large. And everything outside that region, let me select that, I don't want to see. I want to mask it out. So I'm in sort of a detail view here. It's somewhat of a detail view, but somewhat of a filled region, or excuse me, a interior elevation view as well. And I only want to see this portion of this detail. So what a masking region is really great at doing is creating these regions within regions. So I have this inner boundary, I have this outer boundary, and then I have these the region between. And if I hit finish, you're going to notice there is no fill pattern to select. A masking region has one task, and it is to mask out information. So if I place a masking region over something, the idea is that it will mask everything that it's covering out. So I'm going to hit finish, and you're going to notice that that masking region, right, that went from this boundary to this boundary purely masks out everything that it's covering, okay? So I use sketch mode to generate it. I can click on it, and I can move these, the boundary of it with these grips, right? So that works pretty well. So I can alter my view once it's generated, right? Typical Revit style. Revise my view once it's generated. But the idea behind a masking region is to purely mask information out, okay? So filled regions will add detail. They can also obscure items, so they can function as sort of a quasi masking region. And then we have our masking region that will allow you to mask areas of drawings out. These can be used anywhere. They can be used in any drawing or any view, and they are view specific. Okay. This ends the filled region, hatch, and masking region section.